Salut Baptiste et Martin, and welcome back to another video. Today I heard that you got a CRJ, presumably from Aerosoft, so that's very exciting. And so in today's video I thought what I would do was show you a little bit about what I know about the CRJ, which was one of the first add-ons that was available for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 and was recently redone, so I've kind of recently gotten back into it, so I'll refresh a little bit of my memory about this plane. We're sitting here today in Vancouver. This is a freeware airport, quite nicely done, and what I thought we would do today is fly down to Seattle, since that's a nice short flight. But before we get going, there's a couple things I wanted to show you. The first thing is, for CRJ flying, there's a real a YouTube channel by a real CRJ pilot called Yursim CFI, and so because he's a real CRJ pilot, I would highly recommend his videos. They're really great, and he's obviously the expert for all things CRJ and beyond, so check out that if you want to learn more. The other thing is, for yourself, one thing to note too, if you go, I don't know, because you have this on Xbox, I'm not sure where this is, but the Aerosoft also comes with a bunch of documents, and if you go look at these PDFs, these are actually really detailed for Flight Simulator add-ons, so also would highly recommend. That's one of the best ways to learn, is just to kind of sit through those and practice. So with those things out of the way, when I want to find a route, one thing that's kind of helpful to do is to go to flightaware.com, and you can actually search for real-world flights. So if we type in Vancouver's ICAO code CYVR and Seattle's KSEA, we get a list of all these routes that actually exist. And Air Canada Jazz has real routes. They're actually operated by a de Havilland -8, so a little bit different airplane here. But the nice thing about this is you get the real flight numbers, so we can use this, and you can also see where they park. So this is probably a slightly different gate than I am, but we can also see where they're going to in Seattle. So you can pull up any of these, and they can give you a little bit of a sense of where things are. So we can use one of these, and the other thing I use to program or to do flight planning is a tool called not that, I'll pull that up in a second, is a tool called SimBrief. And SimBrief is free, and it's also available now on Microsoft Flight Simulator. So if we do this, we can type in the same information that we have here. So we can type in the airline code for Jazz. We can also type in the same flight number. We enter our departure, and we enter our arrival. We have to select our aircraft type. So if we go down here, we're at the CRJ 700, and we'll use Microsoft. We're a Canadian operator, so I'm going to change this to kilograms. There's lots of other information here, and there's lots of tutorials on online about how to use SimBrief. It takes a little bit of learning, but I'm not going to go over that now. But it gives us route information, both departure and arrival, as well as fuel information, our cruise altitude, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to click Generate Flight. It's going to build a flight plan for me. And I now have that saved. And in this program, which is not free, unfortunately, but it's a very good program called Navigraph, I can import my flight plan. So I can import this into here, and now I have this information available to me. Navigraph is very cool because it provides you with weather data It provides you with routing about departures, approach routes. You can also view your SimBrief plan, which I just imported. I'll talk a little bit about this in just a second. You can get airport information, such as the weather, things like that. So it's really cool, and something I use for every flight that I do. So we'll go a little bit over this in just a second. If we jump back in the cockpit, we can see that the cockpit is now in what's called a cold and dark state. That's because everything is off. And if we go to here, there is, as you can see, an electronic flight bag. And we can get all kinds of stuff from this. For example, we can pull in our flight from SimBrief. Now that's loaded in here. And we can also do things like connect ground power. Ground power is this little cart. It's displayed in a cart here. In the real world, it might be connected to this building, but this cart is supplying a power source to the aircraft, and we can use that. So if we jump up here, actually before we do that, we would want to make sure that our throttles are idle, our flaps are up, gear lever's down, and wiper is off. And with that done, we can come up here, turn on the battery. You're going to hear some self-tests that conduct. So the battery is starting to come up, but this is very minimal power. What we want to do next is we want to turn on AC power. The battery provides DC power, but we want AC power through the ground power unit. So if you turn this on, now the airplane starts to come alive. And you can start to see the screen start to power up, all that good stuff. So that looks good. The other thing we'd want to do is make sure that our nav lights are on. These are the lights on the wings. Anytime the plane is powered up, you want to have those nav lights on. But we don't need to do anything else just yet. So coming down here, if you see here, it says initialize position, and the GPS on the plane doesn't know where we are, and so we want to tell it where we are. And to do that, we have to use what's called an IRS system, and the IRS system is down here. So what we do is we just click these. Oops. Yeah. Oh, okay. Turn off my parking brake for a second. So we turn these to nav, and this starts the IRS process. How long this takes depends on how far away you are from the equator. So because we're all the way up in Vancouver, it could take a little bit longer, but because it's Flight Simulator, you can change your time. And so I've set this to quick. So you can do realistic, you can do instant, but I've set it to quick as a way to get this going a little bit faster. And so what we would do is we could go to this pause init page. We would type in the airport we're departing from, CYVR, and we would grab a GPS position and enter it here. Now with this, the plane can set a GPS position. So pilots would do this before every single flight, just to make sure that everything to program is our route aligned. We're going to do a couple things up here. So the first thing we want to be mindful of is it's about 16 degrees outside, so it's a little bit chilly. So I've already explained that we have power coming from the ground power unit. That's all fine and good, but there's another way we can generate power on the ground that's very important, and it's called through this APU. APU is an auxiliary power unit. It's an engine in the back of the plane, so you can actually see an exhaust open up here when this is powered on. And what the APU does is it provides, because it's an engine, it provides electricity. So it can also provide AC power, but it also provides bleed air pressure that can be used both to provide air conditioning and heat the plane, as well as enough pressure to start the engine. So we need to have the APU running to start engines. If you don't have an APU, you have to use a starter on the ground. That's a bit more complicated. So we're going to turn this on so that we can get some heating in the plane. So we're going to turn power on. We jump down here. You can see the APU Shutoff valve is open, and it's running through its test. We can then start it, and on the screen here it'll start to show this engine powering up, just like you would see on the normal engines. So that's spooling up. You can actually hear it now, and we're going to wait for that to start going. Otherwise, here we just want to make sure all these generators are on. You can do a fire detection test. Hydraulic shutoff valves, we need these off. We can leave the fuel pumps off for now. All this is off. The bleed air will stay at normal. Bleed valve is auto. And when this is auto, these switches have no effect. The engine ignition selector, we can leave that stuff all off. And the hydraulics, we want to make sure that they're testing correctly. So if we jump down here and say hydraulics, you can see that there's different hydraulic systems. Normally you have systems 1A and 2A that are provide hydraulic pressure from the engines, but of course our engines are off, so there's no hydraulic pressure that's going to come from there, but that's expected. And here you can also see what the hydraulic systems do. So they control things like the rudders, the elevators, the spoilers, the reverse thrust, the nose wheel steering, etc. We just want to test that these hydraulic systems are working. So to do that, we're going to turn System 1 to on, System 3B to on, System 2 to on, and then System 3A to on. And everything is looking good. They're fully pressurized. So now we can turn this to auto, and this to off. And we're going to get some warnings as that starts to depressurize. Also, just so you know, if we go to electricity here, you can see that we have AC power. This is from the external power, but this is now off. The APU, because it's now on, is providing external power to both of the buses and the service bus. So because the APU is now on, we don't need the external power, so we can turn this off. Now if you turn this off and your APU is not on yet, you'll lose all power, and you don't want that. So we can disconnect this now. And we can continue on up here. So because our APU is running, we now have bleed air to provide air to the packs. So we can turn the packs on, turn the air conditioning on so you can hear that start to come on. I forgot to say, up here we want to make sure that the manual rate is set to decelerate. This is set to hold, this is off, and the cabin pressure is what we would set our landing elevation at. So, I don't need this anymore. So if I come up here, and I go to Seattle, actually I can pull up the chart here, you can see that Seattle is 432 feet above the ground. So I want to set this here. Now what am I setting? It's a little bit hard to see. So what I want to set is the field elevation here. So this is for the pressurization. So I'm going to tilt this up a little bit. And let's see. Okay, 660, so that's too much. I'll tune this down a bit. 480, that's fine. So that's set, the packs are on, anti-ice is off, we can test the ice detection system. Windshield probes, those go to low. Probes off, these are off, this is just for the lighting overhead. Passenger sign, we can turn our snow smoking to on. Our seatbelt we're going to leave for off because we're not refueled yet, and emergency lights will come to arm. If we jump down here, we would do a couple of things. So you can do a stall test. To do a stall test, you set your trim to 6 degrees. I'll show you about this in a second. Open this, and when that happens, hold this down a bit. You can see the yoke shakes. There's also a ground proximity warning system, but this doesn't seem to work in the new test, or the new CRJ. Wiper is set to off. These lights are fine the way they are. Nose wheel steering we want to leave off right now because we're going to be pushed back in a second. Radar terrain can come on. The rest of this is okay. We can do our cockpit voice recorder test. We hold this for 5 seconds. Okay. And we would test our oxygen. Just turn that on. Make sure we have good oxygen pressure. We could do this on the other side. Okay. We have a couple of tests here, so we can test our anti-skid. Make sure that that comes up here. Test this. Test that. Got a lamp test. This just shows you every single light, just to make sure that the light bulbs are working correctly. And because it's Flight Simulator, they're probably always working correctly. We want to make sure that these are stowed. We can arm our reversers. Oops. No, I don't want you on. And we can do a TCAS test. This is the traffic collision avoidance system. This is alerting us if we're close to other aircraft. We can leave the rest of this off. Turn our standby radio on. We can turn our stab trim and mock trim and turn our yaw damper on. Adjust these lightings as needed. The rest of this we're going to leave off. So we've pretty much got the plane configured in a very general state. But the other thing we need to do is we need to make sure that our weights are what we want. So if we go back to our flight plan, we can see that we have 3,123 kilograms of fuel and a zero fuel weight of, 25,548. So we can actually just type these in. So zero fuel weight 25,548. Fuel 3123. Let's see, 3. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So this is the weight of the plane of everything minus the fuel. This is the fuel. We can load that into the simulator, and that's also going to automatically calculate our takeoff speeds, which we'll talk about in a second. And because we're fueled, we can turn on the seatbelt sign. So now what we want to do, is enter our data into the flight management computer. So there's a couple things that we're going to do. So first, we're going to enter our airport we're at. So we're at CYVR, Vancouver, CYVR. And we're going to Seattle. Our alternate airport is Portland, KPDX. And it says 26 left for our takeoff. Air traffic control would give us a runway, but I'm not flying with air traffic control today, so let's take a look here. So we're situated here. It's telling us we would take off 26 left, but I don't want to taxi all the way down there. I'm just going to choose 26 right. Again, if we were flying online or flying with air traffic control, oh wait, I don't want to do that. We would have to take whatever runway they give us, but yeah, okay. So what we're going to do is click our departure route, and we're going to say 26 right. Let's change it here too. Now it says 5 departures available. The reason that we don't have a departure route is probably because this is a very short route. And but we can let's select this actually. This is the only departure route that's available to us, this YVR. Well, I'm actually going to exit. This is not working. I'm going to do it here. Okay. Okay, this is better. So let's change 26 right, and we're going to do this YVR2. So the Vancouver 2 departure. So let's select that, and we can execute that. And after this, our flight plan, 26 left, direct to Roche. And then we're on the Mariner 8 arrival into Seattle. So after this, if we go to flight plan, okay, we're going to go direct to, how do you spell this? ROESH. Okay. And then we're on the Mariner 8 arrival. So we go to departure, arrival, approach. We are Mariner 8, and we're transitioning to the Mariner 8 arrival at Roche. In other words, if we show this on the map, we're going to have a straight out departure, which we'll talk about in a second, and then we would get directions to this intersection, and this intersection is also the beginning of our arrival, which is shown in green. So if we show this here, we'll talk about this further. We would enter at Roche, and then we would fly to get to our approach, which we'll talk about, as I said, in a second. So we can enter our, I'm going to enter my runway here. In the real world, I think pilots in the CRJ don't. It says 16 right. That's easy. So let's just select that. And we can execute that. So now what we see is a flight plan with departing runway 26 right, Vancouver 2, and we have a discontinuity here. We would expect a discontinuity here. That means there's a gap in the flight plan. So we're here, there's Roche, and there's no flight plan there. That's what we would expect. And we also have a discontinuity after the Mariner 8 arrival. We should also expect that. That's not a problem. In the real world, air traffic control would give us directions, or what they call vectors, to Roche. They would tell us to climb at a certain altitude, give us certain headings. They would tell us what to do. It's not a departure route that you commonly get, especially in Europe, where the departure routes are a pre-programmed route. Here, air traffic control is going to vector us to this point, and then later, air traffic control would vector us from this point to our departing runway. This is a little bit more complicated, but that's maybe for another video. So we're going to leave these discontinuities like this. That's okay. Now I'm going to go to my perf page. I'm going to go perf init, and I need to enter the fuel and the zero fuel weight. Now remember, we already entered that in the plane. We can find this again. Zero fuel weight 25,548, so 25,548. And our fuel, we can actually see here, 3105 versus 3123. Now the reason there's less fuel, is because we have the APU running, and the APU uses fuel, so we need to keep that in mind. Now this is our cruise altitude. So our cruise altitude is here, flight level 190. Oops. We need to say FL, 190. Okay, we can execute that. Unable cruise altitude. So that's interesting. The reason for that, let's see. So Mariner, we're supposed to be, So Roche, it thinks we're going to be at 420 feet, which is definitely not true. We're going to be higher than that. So what I'm going to do is enter slash and say, I don't know exactly what altitude will be. Let's just say 13,000 feet and above. Let's just say that. It's still going to say unable cruise. Let's say right, how far away are these? The plane has calculated that it would make flight level 190, so we'll just see. Again, this is kind of a weird route. I'm not using air traffic control, so maybe I'm wrong about some of these things, but that's okay. ESA +7. And we can also give it the winds. So if we scroll down here on SimBrief, climb, what's our average climb wind? Well, let's just say 220 at 18. We'll just kind of guess. Our cruise, if we make it up to 190, 279 at 38, 279, 38. And our descent, let's say 247 at 18. So just give the plane some rough idea. Execute that. Okay. That looks good. We can also come down here. Turn on these options. I don't think there's anything else I need to do. Okay. So, the final thing we also want to check is our takeoff performance. So this is automatically calculated. Our V1, 125 knots. If we have an emergency below 125 knots, we need to stop on the runway. Our rotation speed is also 125 knots, and our V2 speed is 136 knots. V2 plus 10 is 146, and so that's what we're going to climb out at initially. So if we say set all, it sets them in here, which is very convenient. I'm also interested in this VT speed, 185 knots. This is when we start to accelerate after takeoff, I want to start to climb at 185 feet. So what I'll do is I'll set this here, 185, so that's bugged in there. The idea is that when I take off, about 1,000 feet off the ground, I want to start accelerating, which means that I'm going to pitch the nose down and start to speed up. And I'm going to pitch the nose down to 185 knots as a way to climb out, retract the flaps, and then make our way on to the departure. So the other thing we need to also make sure we need to know is the weather. Okay, real ATIS is not available. Okay, so we can look at this meter report. So for Vancouver, wind 220 at 10 knots, so that's roughly a headwind. We're taking off runway 26. 26 means 260 degrees, so 220 degrees. If we show the runway info, you can see that you have a 7-knot headwind and a 7-knot crosswind. So that's pretty good. 30 square miles, few clouds 4,100 feet, few clouds 6,300 feet, broken clouds 24,000 feet, temperature 17 degrees, and altimeter 3012. So let's set the altimeter. Come down here. It's going to show up here, 3012. So Vancouver's elevation is about just about at sea level. Not surprising. So I'm going to set my MDA to 1,000 feet. So we're 1,000 feet above the airport. And I also want to set my autopilot. So you can see the autopilot panel is here. I could talk a little bit more about this when we're in the air, but first thing is we want to get a heading. So runway 26 right is heading 263. So if I would tune this, I have a autopilot panel, so that's why you don't see this. So we would tune this to 263. Okay, 263. And if we look at the Vancouver departure, you can see if you take off 26 right, you would fly a runway heading 263, and then after that, air traffic control would give you heading instructions. So we won't get those today because we're flying offline, but this is how you would fly that departure route. So it's shown here, 26 left, 26 right, climb heading 263 or assigned by ATC. And maintain 7,000 or assigned, expect radar vectors filed assigned altitude or clearance to flight planned altitude 5 minutes after departure. So our initial climb is 7,000 feet. So it's set this to 7,000. Okay. Finally, takeoff trim 7.2 degrees. So the trim is in the back of the plane. It's kind of a lazy man's autopilot. So if I'm moving my trim wheel now, you can see that it's kind of changing the horizontal stabilizer. Each of the control surfaces has trim, but this is really the only main trim we care about. So we want to set this for takeoff 7.2 degrees. So if I come down here, oops, I'm going to say 7.2. That looks good. So we're all set basically. I'm going to call GSX. Oh wait, before I do that, I want to make sure we close the door. This is removed. Wheel chocks are removed. And so we'll say prepare for pushback. Now when we prepare for pushback, there's a couple things we want to make sure. We're going to start the engine soon, so we want to turn on the fuel pumps. We want to make sure our APU is running, and that's true.
Hello, Captain. We are ready for pushback.
At this point, we can turn on our hydraulic pumps, our 3A pump, and then we also want to turn on our beacon switch. The beacon is on the top of the plane here, and it alerts the ground crew that this plane is about
Departure checks completed.
push
Bypass
back
pin inserted.
and start its engines. So that's obviously very important. We can also run through a checklist. We didn't do this in the interest of time. I'm not going to go through that. I'm just going to do the before start checklist. So passenger signs set to on. Landing elevation, we set that Seattle 480, roughly thereabout. Altimeters
Locking gear.
3013. FMS is checked. IRS is obviously aligned. Our radios and nav aids, we don't have anything to set. And our takeoff briefing, we already talked about that, so that's all completed. So we're going to, how do I want to push back? Let's say nose left.
Release parking brakes.
Okay. So turn this off.
Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
Okay. So we've been cleared to start, so we can do the cleared to start checklist. So APU's on, electrics checked, our takeoff data, that's all set. Our doors are closed, our beacon we checked is on, our fuel pumps are on, our hydraulic pumps auto and on, and our parking brake is off. So we'll start the right engine. We're going to hold this in. And now you can hear the bleed pressure has moved to start this right engine. Our N2 is going to rise. We want to make sure that our ITT temperature is below 100 degrees, and once this is about 20% we're going to enter fuel flow. So there's 20%. Okay. Well. So that's a good engine start. We can now start number 1.
Set parking brakes. Waiting your confirmation for a good engine start.
Okay, 20%, so fuel flow. And we can tell them good
Cockpit
engine
to ground.
start.
We have a good engine start. You can disconnect.
So we're right about here, and so if we wanted to start taxiing down to 26 right, we can see that taxiway Mike 9 will take us there. But we have this lane
Unlocking gear.
taking us out here. So if we do this, I don't know what air traffic control would say, but let's just say, just try to make our way over to Mike. It's not going to be too
Tow truck
graceful today.
disconnected. Bypass pin
Okay,
removed.
so our engines are started. So
Left
if we
is
come
clear.
down to electric,
Right is clear.
we can now see that the engines are now powering the main buses for everything. The APU is no longer needed. And if we go to, you can see, is that next page? Let's see. Oh, well, there's a way to show your DC power too, but that's, I think if I just press this again, okay, yeah. And you can see that this gives you a more detailed look at the DC power. But the point is that the engines are now powering everything, so we no longer need the APU. So I'm going to turn this to stop, and then I can press power button. Other things I want to do up here is we have our hydraulics. We do not need anti-ice today. We can turn our probes on. This all looks good. And we can turn our taxi light on. We also would want to move our flaps. So flaps come to 8 degrees. If we go back here, you can see those. Very cool. And we would do a flight control check. So full forward, full back, full left, full right, rudder left, rudder right. Nose wheel steering can come to armed. Reversers are armed. We can turn our TCAS. It's actually an auto, so that's good. So after start checklist, generators auto, electrics checked, bleed valves still auto. Packs, we would want to make sure these are still on. APU is off, anti-ice is off, nose wheel steering is armed. That looks good. Taxi, okay, flaps and slats. We can look at our indicator here, 8 degrees. Trim, 7.2. Thrust reversers, armed. Flight instruments is checked. Brake temperature is these down here. That's all looking good. So we can turn off our parking brake and start to taxi. So the other thing I want to do before I take off is you can see our flight director is level here. I want to put it in the takeoff mode. And so to do that, I click here, this click spot on the screws, and that's going to arm the takeoff mode. So that's what I want, obviously, for takeoff. Now the CRJ is actually very interesting because, so we're on Tango, and we just want to jump onto Mike here. The CRJ is interesting because there is not an auto throttle on this, so it's actually a little bit more work. You have to be paying attention when you fly the CRJ a little bit more. What we'll see, well, first we're going to crash into this guy here. One of the fun things about Flight Simulator, you have ground crew going all over the place. So you can see in my throttle panel, there are these indents. There are these click spots. Oh, there we go. And you can see that there's one for climb and one for toga. So when we take off, we're gonna rev the throttle up a little bit, like that, or a little bit more, and then once the engines have stabilized, we're gonna do 2 clicks, so into toga, and that's going to align the engines with this blue dot here. This is our takeoff performance. So we want to be 88% N1. The plane will automatically set the thrust to that. And we'll leave it in the toga mode for about 1,500 feet. And after 1,500 feet, we'll put it back into climb. So when we take off, it's going to be a couple of things we need to do when we're on the CRJ. So we're going to follow the flight director bars up. Oh, this taxiway is closed. Oh well. So we're going to follow the flight director bars up, and once we get to be about, like I said, 1,000 feet, we can hit the speed button, and we can set our speed to this VT speed, so 185. Oh, that's too short. And we'll climb out on that. When we're at least, I think, 400 feet above the ground, we can either enter heading mode to follow a heading, or we can hit nav mode to follow a navigation track. Now, because this departure is just something that air traffic control would give us vectors for, we have no navigation path to follow. And as we enter the runway, we turn on the strobe. We can turn on our landing lights once we've been given takeoff clearance, so we'll assume we've gotten that. So in this case, we're just going to arm the heading, because air traffic control would give us a heading. So you can do either one of those. So we can start the clock. We're ready to take off. So we're going to do all those things I just talked about. So spool up the throttle about halfway. Those are stabilized, so let's do 2 clicks.
Update spoilers.
Huh? Oh, it takes my spoilers down. There we go. Okay, so 2 clicks, now we're in toga mode. Hand is on the throttle in case you need to reject the takeoff. Once we hit V1, which we do now, hand comes off the throttle, start rotating the plane up. Positive rate of climb, so we can go gear up. Follow the flight directors. Get a nice rate of climb out of here. Okay, so we're about 1,000 feet. So I'm going to hit the speed button, and I'm going to dial that up to 185. And as I do that, the plane will start to pitch down a little bit. As you can see there. I'm also going to enter heading mode. At this point, air traffic control would hand us over to departure, and we would contact departure. And I'm just going to keep this flying like that. So let's go flaps 1. And as we go flaps up, we want to accelerate a little bit more. So let's start to turn the plane up to, let's go 230 knots. Give it a good rate of climb here. Let's go flaps up. And let's pretend that air traffic control gave us a heading, let's say 210. We would start to follow that. And let's, we're coming up to 6,000 feet. So you're going to hear that horn to tell us that we're almost at the altitude we set. But let's also pretend that air traffic control told us we can climb up to flight level 190 now. So I'm going to set 190. Let's see. In here. Oops. And if I re-click speed mode again, it's set to our speed 255. I'm going to put this to 250. And we'll start to climb up. Alright, let's put the autopilot on. Okay, and you can see here 0 degrees outside. We're just about to pass through clouds. If it's colder than 10 degrees and there's moisture outside, we have to put the cowl anti-ice on. And let's also pretend that air traffic control told us you're clear direct to Roche. So what we would do there is we would enter direct intersection, type Roche, type exect, and now we're on a navigation track, which means we can hit nav, and the plane will start to turn towards that intersection. We can turn off this, and after takeoff we can turn off the reverse thrust. I also realized I didn't do my before takeoff checklist. We would turn on the fuel cross-feed flow, which is here, but that's okay. This is enough for now. That's really the main thing. Make sure that you have no warning messages. We already set the radar display and all that stuff, so that's all looking good. Okay, and we should definitely be able to climb to flight level 190, so that's not a problem. And as we're flying along the nav track here, we can still see our heading indicator is like that. So what we would want to do is always kind of try to keep that aligned. And so we can turn it like that, just to have that. And we can also see we're still at 250 knots, which is good because I want to get a good rate of climb up to our cruising altitude. But when you're above 10,000 feet, you don't have to, you can go faster than 250 knots normally. So I could speed up, and if I wanted to speed up and increase my heading indicator, you can see that the plane will start to pitch down to get that speed. So we'll pitch down, speed up a little bit, and then the plane will start to climb at that altitude. Now you can also see that we're 17,800 feet. And this is starting to flash at me. That's because we're entering our transition altitude. So we want to set standard barometer. So if I click this, it sets it to standard, which is 29.92 inches of mercury. In hectopascals, it's 10.13, which is what the rest of the world uses, but in North America, it's a little bit different. Okay, so we're starting to get to our cruise altitude, and you can also see that we're starting to get pretty fast. So again, the CRJ has no auto throttle, so I would want to start easing back on the throttle as we start to level off, and I can set my speed. This won't do anything by setting the speed because the plane's going to level off, but this is just for my own reference. If I want to keep a certain speed, I can obviously do that. Okay, so we're cruising. Let's turn off the passenger sign. We're also above 18,000 feet. Turn off the landing lights. So now the question is, we have to already start preparing for descent. So we are on the Mariner 8 arrival. And we can see a lot of information here. We're about to come to Roche. And we have a altitude constraint. We need to be above 12,000 at Booner. I never know how to say these names. I'm probably saying this wrong. So let's see. Oh wait, no. That's not on our routes. So at Mariner, we need to be above 12,000 feet. So 12,000 A, 12,000 above, and we need to be at 270 knots. After Mariner, we're going to Bone, which is above 11,000 feet, 250 knots. Nahos, after that, above 8,000 feet, 230 knots. And then Grifty, 6,000 feet at 210 knots. Grifty, 6,210 knots. So that's all programmed in as it should be. You should always double check this because sometimes it's not, but everything looks good today. So that's looking good. We might also try to anticipate what arrival or approach we would get. Now, as I already said, I already put 16 right in because that's easy. And so what 16 right would take us from... So 16 right is this ILS here. And you can see there's all these waypoints before this. So this is not part of the approach, or this is not part of the arrival route, this is part of the approach. And I need to be... Okay. So now we're at Roche, and we're going to start thinking about our approach here. You can see that this waypoint Bugny shows up here, and so we need to be at Bugny at above 3,200 feet, which you can see there. But before we talk more about that, we can see that this TOD shows up here. This is our top of descent. This is what the plane is calculated as the beginning of our descent. Now, in the CRJ, unlike, say, in the Airbus or the Boeing, there's not a vertical navigation, or most CRJs don't have a vertical navigation. So how do we know when we descend? Well, one thing we can do is we can go to VNav, go next page, descent info. We can see we need to be above 12,000 feet at Mariner. So the plane is going to say, tells us that if we want to be at 12,000 feet at Mariner, we need to descend at 1,700 feet per minute. So what I'm going to do is set this to 12,000 feet, set my altitude to 12,000 feet. I want to wait until this is, so 12,000 feet, set there. I want to wait till this is a 3-degree descent path, which will probably align to our top of descent point. Once it's 3 degrees, I'm going to start to descend at the vertical speed shown there. So probably about 2,000, 2,100 feet per minute. So we're getting very close. If I zoom in. Okay, we're just about there. So what I'm going to do is, I would say vertical speed, and I would twist this knob down to 2,200 feet. And I'm going to put my throttle back to idle. So by descending at this rate, we should cross Mariner at about 12,000 feet. Okay, so we're about to cross our transition altitude, so we need to get the altimeter at Seattle. Seattle altimeter, so wind 190 at 15, so quite windy at Seattle, but it's a headwind. 3,000, few clouds, it's scattered, 5,000, broken, 20, okay. Temperature 18 degrees, altimeter 3015, so that's what we need to set. 3015, that looks good. And I'm starting to slow down a little bit so I can put a little bit more throttle in. Now, a couple other things to help me descend. You can see there's these snowflakes. So this is this is telling me that I'm a little bit below the descent path. So I don't have to descend at quite this rate. So let's go down to 2,000 feet per minute, starting to align with that. We can also see that there's this split banana here. And the banana is saying you're going to get to this altitude that you've set, 12,000 feet, right about here. So it's a little bit beyond that. So the other thing we need to keep in mind is we need to also be at 270 knots. So we'll set our speed to 270. And that means a couple of things. So we actually, to slow down, we need to slow our rate of descent. But as we slow our rate of descent, now we're above this point. So a couple of things we can do to help ourselves out. First of all, we can use the speed brake. And if you jump back here, you can see that come out. So that'll help slow us down and keep us on that rate. Now, Mariner is our altitude restriction 12,000 feet above. So we don't have to be at 12,000 feet. So if we don't make it down there in time, that's okay. It's not a hard restriction. So we're starting to slow to 270 knots. And as we start to do that, I'm going to put the speed brake back up. And I've left the anti-ice on. Oh, I should turn the seatbelt sign back on. I've left the anti-ice on because we're going to cross some clouds and it's negative 9 degrees Celsius, so probably want to have those on. A couple other things I want to know. This is an ILS approach for 16 right. So there's a approach frequency 110.75 and a final course of 164. The CRJ should automatically set that. And I can go to my radio. So if I type in ICJL, it's going to tune that ILS frequency, 110.75. And as I said, it should tune the course heading to match that too. Okay, so next, we need to be above 8,000 at Nahos, so let's see, 8,000 Nahos. We'll keep descending at about that rate. We're going a little fast, so we'll start to decrease our vertical speed. We also have on our approach plate, I'm not going to talk about everything here, there's a lot here of course. We have a decision height of 615 feet. But we would set that here, so we can say decision height all the way up 615 feet. What this means is that we have to make a decision when we get to 615 feet. It's about 200 feet above the runway, because this is in MSL, mean sea level, 615, right? Okay. When we get to this point, we need to be able to see the runway. If we cannot see the runway, we have to go around. And we would also make a decision about whether or not we're going to land. Okay, We're just about to 10,000 feet. Below 10,000 feet, we need to be slower than 250 knots. So I'm going to put out the speed brake again, just to help us slow down a little bit. And the next speed restriction I'm really concerned about, or altitude constriction, is Grifty. Because at Grifty, we have to be at 6,000 feet. This is a hard constraint. So if I type in... let's see... Grifty. Oh, I typed this in wrong. Aha, I typed in gritty, nice. Grifty. Ah. I see, Griffy. There we go. So 1,600 feet, so that's exactly what we're at. And we've just gone to below 10,000. One thing I also, of course, would want to do, put the landing lights on at this point. And it says local be tuned, so it knows the localizer frequency for 16 right. Now we're turning into Grifty, and you can see that there's a route discontinuity there. As I said, air traffic control would either assign us a heading, or they might say, at Grifty, cleared 16 right approach. So let's assume that that's what they said. So we could enter this here, and that will close up the route. Okay, let's set 6,000 feet. And what is it doing? Ah. Yeah, the CRJ is a little bit weird. It's got some bugs. So I'm going to set heading to get it back on here. I also need to be at 210 knots, so let's bring the speed brake out one more time to make sure that we hit that. And I'm just going to try to get it. See if we can get that back on. Okay, our next altitude constraint, we need to be above 4,000. So let's just go ahead and set that now. We're at 210 knots, so that's good. We didn't do, let's see, descent, landing elevation, that's set, fuel is fine, TCAS, radar is on, CAS, we have no messages, landing data's set, we just need to know, sorry, our VREF speed, so this is 135 knots. And that's completed. Let's see. Okay, still 5 degrees, so it's still icing conditions. And we're getting close to our approach, and we're under 230 knots, which means we can put our flaps to 1 degree. So that'll help us. Now we saw our VREF speed, so 135 knots, but we also need to know that in Seattle there's a wind of 15 degrees. So we want to add about 7, and it's gusting too, so we'd want to add a few more, this is not doing a good job staying on track. We would add a few more knots to that. So let's approach at about 142 knots. There's a formula to do this correctly, but I'm a little preoccupied with this approach. You can see our localizer shown up in green. So our nav source, we haven't changed this, but you can see there's different nav sources. And localizer 1 is tuned with the course 164, which is the same approach for this ILS here. So that's good. And you can start to see this green dot is showing up nicely there. So let's go 3,200 feet. And I'm going to, the localizer is starting to move over. This needle is starting to move over. So if we press approach, the localizer is captured. The plane is now turning towards that. We're starting to turn down. I'm going to go flaps 8. Let's say set that there. And we can start to see the runway. 8 right. The glide slope is also captured now. The glide slope is going to follow this vertical path all the way down to the runway. And the last thing I'm going to do is something I would have done before, which is to check what gate we're parking at, which is D20. This is not the best time to do this, but let's just see. So D20... Okay, so somewhere... Let's just say somewhere... I don't know where D20 is. Well, that's not our concern right now. Okay, so the plane's following the glide slope nicely. If we had to go around, we missed our approach, for example, we would, well, I'm not going to get into this. This is a bit much. What we would eventually follow this missed approach route, and we would climb to 5,000. So we can set in our altimeter, our altitude indicator, 5,000 feet, just in case. But we're going to land no matter what. We can talk about missed approaches another time. So we're approaching our final approach fix, which is Finca. We need to be at 1,900 feet, so we're 2,800, following the glide slope very nicely. Once we land, we can try to turn off at either November or Papa. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. So nice view of the city. And let's set our, so we said maybe about 142 knots, something like that. Okay, so we're over our final approach fix. So let's go gear down and flaps. Oop. A little too fast. Okay, so let's go autopilot off. And flaps 40. So we're a bit high, but also a bit... add a little bit more power.
Minimums.
Okay, so we're at minimums. We can see the runway, obviously. And we're going to land.
Minimums. Minimums. 500. 500. Minimums. 500. Minimums. 300. Sync rate. 300. Minimums. Minimums. 300. Minimums. 300. Minimums.
Add just a little bit of power as we get to the runway.
Sync rate 50, 40, 30,
30 feet idle.
10.
There we go. And reverse thrust. Now there's no auto brakes on the CRJ, so we have to apply a little bit of brakes. Not too much. force thrust out. What's that? Oh, brake overheat. Well, I wasn't very gentle. Good thing it's Flight Simulator. Okay, so we're off the runway. I don't want to brake too much now. Let's see. Turn the landing lights off. Turn the strobe light off as well. And we go flaps up. And we're crossing a runway. In the real world, air traffic control would have to tell us this is okay, but we can just go ahead and do that. And when we cross the runway, we need to turn on the strobe light. We would turn on the strobe as we hit this this line here. And you would of course check, make sure no one's coming. So you can see those brakes are a little bit overheated. Now as we start to approach the gate area, as we approach the gate, we're obviously going to shut down the engines, and that would leave us with no power. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the APU power. Okay, we're approaching 16 left, strobe light on again, and we're going to start the APU. So that way we'll have power even as we shut down the plane. Okay, so it seemed like Air Canada was parking D20. So yeah, I didn't see where D11. Well, let's just we'll just enter this entry point 66, and we'll just go up to one of these D gates. So there's company. So we'll say D, just say D4. So D4, that one right there. Okay, so 66, this is our entry point. Very nice new scenery for Seattle by MK Studios. Really looking good. So, what'd we say? D4. So, looks like D5. I see them. Turn that off so we don't blind them. Oh, he disappeared. Ah, okay, we have the... This is cool. It's going a little fast there. Okay. Okay, so we'll stop here. Parking brakes on. And we can check our APUs on, so we can turn off the engines. And with the engines off, powering down there, we can turn off our beacon and turn off the seatbelt sign. While we're up here, we can also turn off fuel pumps. Oh, we should have turned these off. And we can turn that off as well. Hydraulic pumps no longer needed. And, oh, I didn't turn on my reversers. That's why my brakes overheated. I did not have reverse thrust. Okay, well, I always make a few mistakes. Let's check our checklist. After landing, okay, our APU's on. Transponder, it's set to standby. Flaps and slats, 0. Lights set, and we turned our probes off. So, only thing last, we want to call up the gate here for the jet bridge, and we can put in chocks, open the door. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, of course, let me know, and I will see you next time. Bye!